June 6, 1944, 6:30 a.m., Normandy, France. 156,000 Allied soldiers storm 5 beaches, the largest amphibious invasion in history. Operation Overlord, D-Day. By midnight, the Allies have a foothold in France. Casualties are heavy. Over 10,000 Allied soldiers are killed or wounded. But the invasion succeeds. Within a year, Nazi Germany surrenders. World War II in Europe ends. The Allies win. That's what happened. That's the history we know. But it was close. Incredibly close. At Omaha Beach, American forces nearly failed completely. For several hours, commanders actually considered abandoning that beach. If the weather had been worse, the invasion would have been postponed. If German reinforcements had arrived faster, the beachheads could have been pushed back into the sea. D-Day succeeded by the narrowest of margins. So what if it hadn't? What if D-Day had failed? What if the Allies were pushed back into the English Channel? How would World War II have ended? How would the world be different today? This is the alternate history nobody talks about. The timeline where 156,000 Allied soldiers landed in Normandy and lost. Let's explore what would have happened, step by step, consequence by consequence. Because understanding what could have gone wrong helps us appreciate how close we came to a very different world. Let's say D-Day fails on June 6, 1944. German reinforcements arrive faster than expected. Rommel's panzers reach the beaches within hours instead of days. The Atlantic Wall holds. By June 7th, the Allies are forced to evacuate. Thousands of soldiers are killed or captured. The survivors retreat to England. The immediate consequences are devastating. First, Allied morale collapses. The largest invasion in history has failed. Newspapers in America and Britain report disaster. Public support for the war effort drops dramatically. American generals Eisenhower and Bradley are blamed. Churchill faces calls to resign. Roosevelt's re-election in November 1944 is suddenly uncertain. Second, Germany experiences a massive propaganda victory. Hitler claims divine providence has saved the Reich. German morale, which was declining, suddenly rebounds. More importantly, neutral countries reconsider their positions. Spain and Turkey, which were moving toward the Allies, now hedge their bets. Sweden might stop providing intelligence to Britain. Third, and most critically, the Eastern Front changes. In our timeline, when D-Day succeeded, Germany had to fight on 2 major fronts. This forced Hitler to pull divisions away from Russia to defend France. But if D-Day fails, those divisions stay on the Eastern Front. Stalin is furious. The Soviets have been begging for a second front for 3 years. The failure confirms Stalin's suspicions that the West wants Germany and Russia to bleed each other dry. The alliance between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies begins to crack. Not openly, but the seeds of the Cold War start earlier and grow faster. By August 1944, in this alternate timeline, the war looks very different. Germany holds all of France. The Eastern Front is reinforced. Allied unity is damaged. But the war isn't over, not even close. The Allies don't give up. They can't. Nazi Germany must be defeated. But they need a new plan. By September 1944, in this timeline, Allied commanders are planning a second invasion. But where? When? And can they afford another failure? The options are limited. They can't invade at Normandy again. German defenses there are now even stronger. Rommel knows exactly where the Allies will try to land because they already tried once. Some generals suggest invading southern France through the Mediterranean. Others propose landing in Norway. Some even suggest bypassing France entirely and invading through the Netherlands. But every option has problems, and every option requires months of preparation. The earliest a second invasion could happen is spring 1945. That's almost a year later than D-Day in our timeline. Meanwhile, the war continues. The strategic bombing campaign intensifies. British and American bombers pound German cities. But without ground forces in France, the bombing alone can't win the war. Germany uses this breathing room effectively. They accelerate production of jet fighters. The Me-262, which in our timeline came too late to matter, now enters service in larger numbers. German jets start shooting down Allied bombers at alarming rates. Worse, German rocket and missile development continues. The V-1 and V-2 rockets that terrorized London keep improving. By early 1945 in this timeline, Germany has more advanced rockets, more accurate, longer range. And then there's the nuclear question. Germany's nuclear program was always behind the Allies, but in our timeline, Germany collapsed before they could catch up. In this timeline, with the war lasting longer, does Germany get closer to a nuclear weapon? Probably not. Close enough to deploy one, but the uncertainty keeps Allied planners awake at night. By January 1945, the second invasion is planned. Location: southern France. Date: April 1945. But that's 6 months away, and a lot can happen in 6 months.
While the Allies regroup, the Soviet Union keeps pushing west. And without a Western front to split German forces, the Eastern Front becomes even bloodier. In our timeline, Soviet forces entered Poland in summer 1944. In this ultimate timeline, they do the same. But the German resistance is stronger. Remember, Germany has those extra divisions that in our timeline were sent to defend France. Those divisions are now on the Eastern Front. The battles are more intense. Soviet casualties are higher. But Stalin doesn't care about casualties. He has virtually unlimited manpower. He keeps pushing. By winter 1945, Soviet forces are approaching Germany's eastern border, but they're exhausted. The offensive has cost millions of lives. Here's where things get interesting. Stalin makes a calculation. The Allies failed at D-Day. They're planning a second invasion, but Stalin doesn't trust them to succeed. He can't rely on the West to defeat Germany. So Stalin decides the Soviet Union will defeat Germany alone. And if the Soviets defeat Germany alone, then the Soviets alone will decide Germany's fate. Stalin accelerates his offensive. He orders his generals to reach Berlin before the Western Allies can invade successfully. Soviet soldiers are told they're racing the Americans and British. This has huge implications. In our timeline, the Western Allies and Soviets met in the middle of Germany. The country was split between them. In this timeline, Stalin is planning to take all of Germany, all of it, before the Western Allies can establish a foothold. And he might succeed, because while the Allies are preparing their second invasion for April 1945, Soviet forces are already fighting inside Germany by March 1945. The race for Berlin is on, but it's a race the Soviets are winning. April 15, 1945, the second Allied invasion begins. Southern France, codename Operation Anvil Dragoon II. This time, it works. German defenses in the south are weaker. They're focused on defending the north and fighting the Soviets in the east. The Allies establish beachheads. Within a week, they're pushing inland. But it's 11 months later than D-Day in our timeline. 11 months of lost time. By early May 1945, Allied forces are advancing through southern France. They're heading north toward Paris and east toward Germany. But they're hundreds of miles behind where they were in our timeline. Meanwhile, on May 2, 1945, Soviet forces capture Berlin, just like in our timeline. But unlike our timeline, there are no Western Allied forces anywhere near Berlin. The Soviets have taken the German capital alone. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrenders, just like in our timeline. But the surrender is to Soviet forces only. The Western Allies are still in France. Here's where the alternate timeline diverges dramatically. In our timeline, Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones: American, British, French, and Soviet. The division was agreed upon at conferences in Yalta and Potsdam. But in this alternate timeline, Stalin has leverage the Western Allies don't. Soviet forces occupy all of Germany, all of it. They're in Hamburg, Munich, Frankfurt, everywhere. When the Western Allies arrive at Germany's western border in June 1945, Soviet forces are already there, dug in, occupying every major city. The Allies demand that Stalin honor the agreements to divide Germany. Stalin smiles and says, "What agreements? You weren't here. My soldiers died taking Berlin. Why should I give you half of what we conquered?" The attention is immediate and dangerous. Two armies, supposed allies, facing each other across Germany, both armed with millions of troops, both exhausted from war, but ready to fight. Welcome to the Cold War. Except it starts in 1945, not 1947, and it starts hot, not cold. Summer 1945. The war against Germany is over, but the peace is fragile. In our timeline, the United States demonstrated nuclear weapons in August 1945 by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This shocked the world, including Stalin. In this alternate timeline, the same thing happens. America has nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union doesn't. Not yet. This nuclear monopoly gives America leverage. President Truman demands Stalin withdraw Soviet forces from Western Germany, share occupation as originally agreed. Stalin refuses. Soviet forces stay. Truman threatens to use nuclear weapons if Stalin doesn't comply. This is the most dangerous moment in the alternate timeline. Stalin calls the bluff. He bets that America won't actually use nuclear weapons to enforce occupation zones in Germany, not after just using them on Japan. Stalin is right. Truman backs down. The American public won't support another war immediately after defeating Germany and Japan. Congress won't authorize it. So the division of Germany becomes a fact on the ground. The Soviets control all of Germany. All of it. They're in Hamburg, Munich, Frankfurt, everywhere. When the Western Allies arrive at Germany's western border in June 1945, Soviet forces are already there, dug in, occupying every major city. The Allies demand that Stalin honor the agreements to divide Germany. Stalin smiles and says, "What agreements? You weren't here. My soldiers died taking Berlin. Why should I give you half of what we conquered?" The attention is immediate and dangerous. Two armies, supposed allies, facing each other across Germany, both armed with millions of troops, both exhausted from war, but ready to fight. Welcome to the Cold War, except it starts in 1945, not 1947, and it starts hot, not cold. Summer 1945. The war against Germany is over, but the peace is fragile. In our timeline, the United States demonstrated nuclear weapons in August 1945 by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This shocked the world, including Stalin. In this alternate timeline, the same thing happens. America has nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union doesn't. Not yet. This nuclear monopoly gives America leverage. President Truman demands Stalin withdraw Soviet forces from Western Germany, share occupation as originally agreed. Stalin refuses. Soviet forces stay. Truman threatens to use nuclear weapons if Stalin doesn't comply. This is the most dangerous moment in the alternate timeline. Stalin calls the bluff. He bets that America won't actually use nuclear weapons to enforce occupation zones in Germany, not after just using them on Japan. Stalin is right. Truman backs down. The American public won't support another war immediately after defeating Germany and Japan. Congress won't authorize it. So the division of Germany becomes a fact on the ground. The Soviets control all of Germany, all of it. They're in Hamburg, Munich, Frankfurt, everywhere. When the Western Allies arrive at Germany's western border in June 1945, Soviet forces are already there, dug in, occupying every major city. The Iron Curtain, which in our timeline fell across the middle of Germany, now falls at Germany's western border. This has massive implications. All of Germany becomes communist, not just East Germany. All of it. Berlin doesn't become a divided city. It's fully Soviet. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and now all of Germany. The Soviet sphere is much larger than in our timeline. Western Europe is smaller. Britain, France, the Benelux countries, Italy, that's it. Everything east of the Rhine River is communist. The Cold War has started, but the balance of power is different. The Soviet Union is stronger, the West is weaker, And both sides are more hostile because the alliance ended in betrayal and standoff rather than shared victory. So what does this alternate world look like in the decades after World War II? First, the Cold War is more dangerous. The Soviet Union controls more territory, Stalin is emboldened, he's more aggressive in Korea, Vietnam, everywhere. The West is more fearful. The nuclear arms race accelerates. Both sides build more weapons faster. The Cuban Missile Crisis, which in our timeline nearly started World War III, might actually start it in this timeline. Second, Germany develops very differently. In our timeline, West Germany became an economic powerhouse and a stable democracy. East Germany struggled under communism. In this timeline, all of Germany is communist until the Soviet Union collapses. German engineering and industry are under Soviet control for decades. When communism finally falls, probably in the 1990s, Germany emerges much weaker economically. Third, the European Union probably doesn't exist. The EU was built on Franco-German reconciliation and economic integration, but in this timeline, France and Germany are on opposite sides of the Iron Curtain. No reconciliation, no integration. Fourth, America's role in the world is different. In our timeline, America's victory in World War II established it as a superpower. In this timeline, the failed D-Day and the last-minute entry into Germany damages American prestige. America is still powerful, but not as dominant. Finally, and most speculatively, technology develops differently. Many innovations came from the Cold War competition in our timeline, but with a different Cold War dynamic, maybe the space race happens differently. Maybe computers develop differently. Maybe the internet emerges at a different time or place. We can't know all the consequences. Butterfly effects ripple through decades. Small changes compound into massive differences. But we can say this with certainty. If D-Day had failed, the world today would be dramatically different. Probably worse, more divided, more dangerous, poorer.